number 7. We're getting close to midterms. Getting exciting. So, this was kind of the anthem of the Depression. Plenty of nothing, which is why I'm giving you a little bit of the backstage view. The anthem of the Depression really was first performed as Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? From the crash in 1929 to the outbreak of World War II, the Broadway musical kept the troubles of the nation at bay, along with glamorous stars such as Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. The musical theater offered political satire and folk opera, bringing hope and comic relief to these desperate times. In an era of yearning dreams, Broadway offered an effervescent antidote to America's darkest days. 1930s was a depression. You know, everyone was trying to make a living. And to be working was a good thing. To survive was the main thing. People weren't thinking so much about the art of the theater. Everybody was working for minimum, and it wasn't altogether bad because people did shows they wouldn't have done had it been a normal time. The shows in the 20s were escapist things. Take Hijinks, which was senseless, and most of the musicals at that time didn't reflect life at all. It was a kind of an oopsie-whoopsie view of life. But when the Depression came, that changed everything. In that the claims and the styles and the topics of the shows that were done, there is much more social commentary. There's much more relationship to the bad times. And I think you would get that from a song like Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? This is Mandy Patinkin. And I know you've heard this song in previous lectures, but it was so important to the era.
They used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed the mob. When there was earth to plow or guns to bear, I was always there, right there on the job. They used to tell me I was building a dream, with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line, just waiting for bread? Once I built a railroad, made it run, made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done.
Yip Harburg said,
Brother, can you spare
I was working on a sketch for a Broadway review, Americana. On stage we had men in old soldiers' uniforms, but it needed a song, and this was that song. While most popular songs still wanted to pretend that life is just a bowl of cherries, Broadway in the 30s was now open to experiments in form and content. When Bing Crosby recorded Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?, the doleful Broadway ballad took the hit parade by surprise. This song spoke to the heart and to the minds and to the emotions and the thoughts of everybody who lived during the Great Depression. It became the anthem of the early 30s, and at one point it was even banned from the radio because it was too potent. But essentially what it was saying was, we built the country. Why can't we share in its wealth? It's a familiar question. People are still asking it now. The music publishers were total censors of every popular song that came out because you couldn't get it through the music publishers. If you couldn't get it through them, you couldn't get it produced. That acknowledgement of poverty, if you couldn't get it out on the street, then you couldn't get it heard. And at that point, all the publishers wanted were love songs and escapes. The way this got through that censorship thing was because it was a Broadway show. People started to listen, and because of the context it was in, it was depoliticized. That doesn't mean that people watching or hearing it didn't get that it was political. Broadway was always the bastion of freedom for arts in the United States. Yip Harburg is quoted as saying, "A song is the pulse of a nation's heart, a fevered chart of its health. Are we at peace? Are we in trouble? Do we feel beautiful? Are we violent? How do you know?" He felt the way you knew was by listening to our music.
People are queer, they're always crowing, scrambling about. Why don't they stop someday, address themselves this way? Why are we here? Where are we going?
In 1930, a brassy 21-year-old talent first stepped into the spotlight. She would become the emblem of Broadway. Woman close to my heart. The woman who could hold a note as long as the Chase Manhattan Band. Ethel Merman. She had a voice like a trumpet, and you could hear every word she said. She had a kind of good humor on stage. She was larger than life. Let me give you a little of Ethel Merman.
My story is much too sad to be told, but practically everything leaves me totally cold. The only exception I know is the case when I'm out on a quiet spree, fighting vainly the old ennui, and I suddenly turn and see your fabulous face. I get no kick from champagne. Mere alcohol doesn't thrill me at all. So tell me, why should it be true that I get a
kick out of you. She was born Ethel Zimmerman to Scottish-German parents in Astoria, Queens, and started singing in her church choir. She never took voice lessons. Instead, she learned shorthand and worked as a stenographer for BK Vacuum Booster Break. After work, she sang in clubs and ended up on the vaudeville circuit, where she changed her name because it fit the marquee. Her big break came when she was cast in Girl Crazy, which featured music and lyrics by George and Ira Gershwin. What struck George and Ira as riotous was the fact that when Ira wrote additional lyrics, she would write them down in shorthand. Ethel did not see what was so funny. What could have been more natural? I'd been a secretary at night. October 14th, 1930 was opening night at the Alden Theater. Ethel Merman's first number was the 8th song of the evening. No one had heard anything like this.
Look at what I've got. I got rhythm, I got music, I got my man who could ask for anything more. I got daisies in green pastures, I got my man who could ask for anything more. An old man's trouble, say I don't mind him, but you won't find him round my door. I got starlight and I got sweet dreams, I got my man who could ask for anything more, who could ask for anything more.
The audience went berserk. And at intermission, George Gershwin visited Merman in her dressing room. Ethel has been quoted as saying, "He asked me, 'Do you know what you're doing?' 'No,' I responded. Well, he advised me, never go near a singing teacher and never forget your shorthand." That might have worked for her, but for most of us, we do need a singing teacher. The first production to open on Broadway in the 1930s was also a Gershwin show, a reworking of an anti-war satire called Strike Up the Band. The original had closed out of town in Philadelphia in 1927, but with the onset of the Great Depression, musical comedy that poked fun at politics was now welcomed on Broadway. The success of Strike Up the Band led the Gershwin brothers and writers George S. Kaufman and Maury Riskind to write a new show that was as funny as the government, but not nearly as dangerous. Let me give you a little taste of that.
Wintergreen for president. Wintergreen for president. He's the man the people choose.
Wintergreen for president.
The Irish and the Jews. Wintergreen for president. Wintergreen for president.
One eyewitness said, I saw of the icing so many times, I can't tell you. When I first saw that, I'd never seen that kind of satire in politics, and they got away with it. I mean, you don't know what those musicals were like in those days. People came on in groups and they sang a song, they told a joke, and then they went off. But this show had a book, like Showboat. All those years until we got another musical that had a book of the icing. People weren't used to that. Usually there was no book to speak of, but Of the Icing was a book, and it had a story, and it had great ideas. It was wonderful. The plot lampooned the ineptitude of Congress, the self-importance of the Supreme Court, and the total irrelevance of Vice President Alexander Russell Bottom. Kind of has a flavor of being appropriate today. The humor of that show still resonates. It still tells you something when you poke fun at the vice president, and you poke fun at love and sex in the White House, all subjects that have not exactly left us now. Also, all not subjects that are often funny. Mr. President, what do you have to say? And in the lines, he says, impeach me, fine. Tell me, sue me. My Mary's love means much more to me. Nothing. Off. We want no preachment. It's time to vote on his impeachment. And that was 1927. In the spring of 1932, based on its book and lyrics, Of the Icing, been around that long, and it became the first musical to win the Pulitzer Prize. Let's hear a little more of the Icing. Here we go.
Of the icing, baby.
This is Ella Fitzgerald.
Summer, autumn, winter, spring, baby. You're my silver lining. You're my sky of blue. There's a love light shining just because of you. Of the icing, baby. You have got that.
While the fictional President John P. Wintergreen entertained the public at the Music Box Theater, a Democratic governor from New York, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was elected president. He was famous for saying that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Ann Douglas, a theater historian, is quoted as saying, there was a color line that existed on Broadway. It didn't get broken for many, many years because the tradition was that Black performers should stay in vaudeville, or they should stay in minstrel shows, or they can do jazz numbers, individual numbers. They can do this or that, but we don't actually mix the two races on stage at the same time, doing the same scene or song in performance. That was the way it was. it was some kind of a rule. I don't know who made the rule, but it was some kind of rule. Until we get to Ethel Waters.
Whoever said a good man was hard to find, positively, absolutely, sure was blind. I found the best that ever was. Here's just some of the things he does. He shakes my ashes, greases my griddle, churns my butter, strokes my fiddle. My man is such a handy man. He threads my needle, creams my wheat, heats my heater, chops my meat. My man is such a handy man.
Ethel Waters started her career as a teenager billed as Sweet Mama String
Don't
Bean.
care.
Beginning in 1927, she would star in an all-black Broadway show. There were several. One was called Africana, another The Blackbird's Review, and Rhapsody in Black, where she made an astonishing $2,500 a week. Ethel Waters was a big star
He's got a
on black circuits. And she didn't want anyone telling her how to run her act. She wasn't going to do minstrel. She wasn't going to play to certain types of stereotypes. She always had enormous amounts of what would then be called race pride. When she introduced Stormy Weather in 1933 at the Cotton Club in Harlem, Waters imbued the music with the weight of her own life story. Let me give you a little Stormy Weather.
Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather. Since my man and I ain't together, keeps raining all the time. Life is bare, gloom and misery everywhere, stormy weather. Just can't get my poor self together. I'm weary all the time.
Ethel came into the world
So weary
around
all
1900.
the time.
Her life would certainly lead her to be able to sing the heck out of this song. She was born after a man raped her mother at knife point. She was reared in a Philadelphia ward so poor and violent it was known as the Bloody Eighth. But singing was her escape. She is quoted as saying, "I can't read music, never have. My music is all queer little things that come into my head. I feel these little trills and things deep inside me and I sing them that way." After seeing her nightclub performance, Irving Berlin hired her for his next Broadway review. Berlin was now teamed with a talented young writer, Moss Hart, and together they used the structure of a newspaper for their next musical. They had headlines, gossip, comic strips. That was all the basis for this new show. Margot Jefferson, a theater critic, said, "The review, which had been very light and entertaining in most cases through the 1920s, was becoming sharp and politically aware, and Irving Berlin had decided, fittingly given the 30s and this political consciousness that was coming up, that was making its way into popular culture, that he wanted to do a timely review. So he conceived of this as the songs would be the through line. Each song would be attached to a newspaper headline. There were lots of sketches and lots of songs, and that's what Berlin liked. He was actually very suspicious of the book musical, or as he called it, the situation show. But give a review with different songs and different skits, and he was in heaven, as he would say, in his own song. Ethel Waters in one show portrayed everything from an exotic Caribbean dancer who started a heat wave by letting her seat wave to a distraught Southern woman singing a lament called Supper Time. She sang this song after her husband had been lynched. Very political. The brick wall on the back of the theater was the first set. The entrance of Ethel Waters, this monumental woman, had a bandana on her head. She had an apron on. The curtain closes behind her. And on that curtain is a silhouette of a man hanging from a tree with his head on the side with a rope around his neck. New Yorkers didn't know in those days about lynching in the South. It was very unbelievable that they did it. They did that show. They did it in that style in the first place because you just didn't bring reality onto stage in musical comedy or a review. It was just unheard of back then. But she came forward with the beat of that orchestra, this funk of hers, and she went to her knees and she sang Supper Time.
Supper time, I must set the table 'cause it's supper time. Somehow I ain't able 'cause that man of mine ain't coming home no more. Supper time, kids will soon be yelling for their supper time. How I keep from telling them that man of mine ain't coming home no more. How I keep explaining when they ask me where he's gone.
Ethel Waters said, if one song could tell the whole tragic history of a race, Summertime was that song. In singing it, Ethel Waters had said, I was telling my comfortable, well-fed, well-dressed listeners about my people. To a person who has talent and is willing to work hard, Broadway in New York is as friendly as Main Street in my hometown, Peru, Indiana. Anyway, that was Cole Porter's point of view. Ethel Waters poured her heart out to people. And what Cole Porter did was use his wit and his sarcasm and his mask, his cover, to be able to let people know of the humanity of gayness. Cole Porter is well known for his incredible lyrics and his incredible style, but a lot of people don't know that Cole Porter was gay.
Due to landscape gardeners gifted, Father Knickerbocker's face is being lifted so much that you hardly know it as such. All the streets are being dressed up, so before they ruin Broadway, I suggest up you go to the city fathers and say, whoa, glorify 6th Avenue and put bathrooms in the zoo. But please, don't monkey with Broadway. Put big floodlights in the park and put Harlem in the dark. But please, don't monkey with Broadway. Though it's tawdry and plain, it's a lovely old lane, full of landmarks galore and memories gay. So move Grant's Tomb to Union Square and put Brooklyn anywhere. But please, please, I beg of my knees, don't monkey with old
Broadway. Cole Porter was an enigma to many people. He was sophisticated, urbane, he was dirty. He was determined to become a Broadway writer. He wanted to be like Irving Berlin. He wanted to be like Jerome Kern. The same time he was rich and idle and a playboy, he'd like to be on the Riviera, and he liked his nice apartment in Paris. So he tried to have both worlds at once. And he got it. In the gloom of the Depression, Cole Porter offered Broadway audiences an escape to a world of refined wit and luxury. A rich Midwestern Episcopalian with a degree from Yale, Porter wrote both music and lyrics. His effervescent songs were a tonic to the struggling nations. Here's a little Begin the Beguine. So elegant. Surviving child of a wealthy family. His father, Samuel Fenwick Porter, was a druggist by trade. His mother, who indulged most of her boy's wishes, was the daughter of James Omar J.O. Cole, the richest man in Indiana, a coal and timber speculator who dominated the family. Porter's strong-willed mother doted on him and began his musical training at an early age. He learned the violin at age 6, the piano at 8. He wrote his first opera with help from his mother. At 10, Porter went to Yale College, a legacy student, meaning his grandfather had attended Yale. J.O. Cole wanted his grandson to become a lawyer. But Cole found that music and his ability to entertain made it easy for him to make friends. Porter wrote 300 songs while he was at Yale. During college, Porter became acquainted with New York City's vibrant nightlife, taking the train there for dinner, theater, and nights on the town with his classmates before returning to New Haven, Connecticut. In 1915, Porter's first song on Broadway, Esmeralda, appeared in the review Hands Up. Porter maintained a luxury apartment in Paris where he entertained lavishly. His parties were extravagant and scandalous, with much gay and bisexual activity. Italian nobility, cross-dressing, international musicians, and a large surplus of recreational drugs. In 1918, he met Linda Lee Thomas, a rich Louisville, Kentucky-born divorcee, 8 years his senior. She was beautiful and well-connected socially. The couple shared mutual interests, including a love of travel, and she became Porter's confidant and companion. The couple married the following year. She was in no doubt about Porter's homosexuality, but it was mutually advantageous for them to marry. For Linda, it offered continued social status and a partner who was the antithesis of her abusive first husband. For Porter, it brought a respectable heterosexual front in an era when homosexuality was not publicly acknowledged. They were, moreover, genuinely devoted to each other and remained married from December 1919 until her death in 1954. I'll play a little more Cole Porter.
In the olden days, a glimpse of stocking was looked on as something shocking, but now God knows, and He knows. Good authors too, who once knew better words, now only use four-letter words, writing prose.
So we will be getting ready for the midterm at this point, and I'd like to give you some choices. For those of you who like to perform, choose a song from any of the listening lists that go with these lectures and perform it. You can sing, play, or even lip sync. Act it out. Or you can create a silent movie in the style of 1920s. For both of those projects, stay under 5 minutes, that's all. And you can also work on the video that you send me in a group. They can be friends you already know outside of class. They can be people from class. They can be your family. If you have people who are super skilled at editing or super skilled at writing music, they can be involved. It's your project. You just need to head it up, choose the material, videotape it, and get it to me. Post it in YouTube and send me the link in my email. Okay, now maybe you're not comfortable performing or creating a piece. That's okay. That your midterm grade will not depend on your performance skills, okay? For people more comfortable with written work, you could create a detailed 20 or 30 slide PowerPoint presentation on a topic that we've covered in American musical theater, on a topic between 1890 and 1940. That's about where we are right now. As you already know, if you get stuck or need help, you can always email me and I will respond as quickly as I'm able. Congratulations! We've made it to halfway through the class. Yes! There will be no work assigned for next week. For week number 8, there is no work. That is just for you to create this video project and get it posted and get it to me. But there will be no assignments, no discussions, no quizzes. Focus all of week number 8, that midterm week, on this video project. You can also use it to catch up on anything that you might have already missed too. Anything numbered, number 1 through number 8, you should have done by now. And I'll make sure all deadlines are open. Again, if you run into any problems whatsoever, email me and I'll do my best to make sure that you have as full access, as many answers as you need, okay? So think about it. Come up with something really good. Entertain me. I don't want to have to always be the one to say, let me entertain you. It's your turn now, okay?